Most of us don't think very much about it, but hydroelectric dams on the Connecticut River are responsible for producing a significant share of the hydroelectric power produced in our region. Now, several of those facilities, including ones at Turners Falls and Northfield Mountain, are up for license renewal. Andrew Fisk, Executive Director of the Connecticut River Watershed Council in Greenfield, visited Connecting Point to tell us more about the licensing process and the growing need for the clean energy the river provides.
It's important that people remember that their river makes electricity. There's 13 in total hydroelectric facilities on the river and many others on the tributaries. So this watershed generates a lot of electricity for New England. And when you're looking at a hydroelectric facility, it's important to remember that it's the public's river. And so what we're doing, it's complicated, it's long, but it's fundamentally a simple conversation. We want electricity. We need electricity. Hydroelectricity is a good renewable energy source. Like all energy, it's got a trade-off. Nothing's perfect. And so this conversation is really about, as the public, we're giving a company the right to create a public good. And what do we get in exchange for the use of our river? And how do you make that facility have the smallest ecological footprint as possible? Because dams significantly change rivers, and they make it hard for migratory fish, really hard for migratory fish.
Right now, the whole topic of hydropower couldn't be more timely. Right. Governor Baker here in Massachusetts, Governor Patrick before him, both have been stressing the need for more renewable, non-fossil energy, non-polluting energy. Hydropower is right at the heart of that. We've got something like the Connecticut River. I was surprised, correct me if I have this wrong, but just these 5 dams we're talking about relicensing now are responsible for 30% of the hydropower used in this part of New England. Do I have that about right?
That's about right. The percentages change. About 11 to 15% of our energy comes from hydro in the region, and the facilities on the Connecticut generate a large portion of that. And it's the conversation throughout New England. How do we meet these ambitious goals for renewable energy? And hydropower is one of those. Wind, solar, hydro, biomass are all designated as renewable energy. So we look at this conversation as an opportunity to both reduce the ecological footprint, get more public benefits, and you know what? Actually be able to generate the same or more hydroelectricity.
As part of the whole effort to get people to give you some input on this, their concerns about renewing these dams, you've got something going, and correct me if I get some of the details wrong on this, please, but the power of water, the power of words. And you're basically asking people, let us know what you think, but you don't just want a phone call or a form letter, an email. And you brought along some things you've already collected. You're going to various places and asking people, make us something that we're going to make part of a huge kind of an art display.
Exactly.
I know the plan is eventually to put it on display at the State Capitol building in Montpelier, Vermont, and other places around the region. You brought some with you. The one in particular you were showing me before is so cool. I'm going to grab this, but ask you to hold it for a minute and just tell us, a little bit about this. This is one of a number you already have.
Sure.
And this one is really kind of extra special.
It is. And so this is an image where a gentleman, Rich Holschuck, who's taught himself the Abnaki language, and there's many variants of that. But when you're looking here, he has described the river and its tributaries in this Native American language. And so this project, The Power of Water, The Power of Words, I think it's safe to say not many people really know when a hydropower relicensing is happening. And so we want to get the public involved because it's their river. And just to let you know the value of just the 2 facilities in Massachusetts, those 2 facilities, in Northfield Mountain, Turners Falls, they generate about 1,200 megawatts of electricity. That's a very large amount of electricity, and they have just sold for north of $1.4 billion. So these are large companies that have a lot of resources to operate these facilities in ecologically sound ways. So rather than a bunch of emails or a petition, what we want to do is create a influential, inspirational, large-scale art installation. And so we're collecting 1,000 of these stories on these torn pieces of coverweight paper, and they will be installed as a river of words. And we are going to install them in the places that decision makers congregate. And so the State House in Vermont, and then the State House in New Hampshire, and then also in Boston. Because the state, under state and federal law, has a very important say in how these licenses are issued. So it's a state conversation as much or more than a federal conversation. And so we're hoping that when we have these discussions, you ask somebody, what do you want for your river? And that emphasizes ownership and aspirations. And that's really what we want to get. And you get that in this format in a much more compelling way than a lot more emails or petitions or form letters.
I want to circle back to something you said a couple of minutes ago that's so interesting. Read up on it a little bit before you came in. You mentioned that you put a dam on a river, you significantly change that river. You disconnect the river in a way, and not just for the fish who may need to go up to spawn or get downriver to feeding or whatever it may be. Beyond the aquatic species, creates reservoirs. And I didn't realize this, that while that makes a lovely recreational area, it warms up a river. And that changes. Those are the kind of things everybody needs to think about when you're relicensing these facilities, correct?
Exactly. So when you have the type of boating resources and opportunities on the river are really different with dams. And so you have flat water boating opportunities because you have reservoirs, but you also eliminate whitewater opportunities. And yes, the fish community is going to be very different in a flowing stretch of river that's seeing water from a dam release versus in that reservoir. So it changes everything. Sometimes we see that as a positive, other times it's very much a negative. And so that's what's interesting about the conversation for a hydropower facility. It's ultimately about balance. How do we balance the right to generate electricity and generate a reasonable return with the right of our ownership and using that river? And this conversation ends up with the company providing additional public benefits. And so if you've ever been on the Quinnatucket or gone to Northfield Mountain, those are facilities operated as a requirement of the license because the government said, you can do this, but we want you to provide this benefit as well. So the companies want to hear from the public, what do we want? And it's ultimately coming down to that negotiation and balancing test.
Overall, with things going on now, with things you know are thought of and planned for the future, compared to years past, you're pretty comfortable and confident that the river's in pretty good shape now, pretty clean, and likely to remain so if we all stay on our guard?
Exactly. The federal law, you think of it like a ratchet, and so it ratchets, it can't go backwards. Now what we have to do is these clean, beautiful rivers, we need to fill them back up with fish. That's the next objective because the fish are not in the numbers that they used to be, could be, or should be.
Well, Andrew Fisk, always good to have you here with us. Thanks for what you're doing for the river.
Great. Thanks, Jim.